Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farber. Péter Magyar's inauguration this past Saturday as Hungary's new prime minister is already reshaping European politics, from efforts to unlock 17 billion euros in frozen EU funds to renewed talk of reviving the Visegrad Group alongside Poland, Slovakia and the Czech Republic. At the same time, the region is confronting growing security pressures, including drone incidents over the Baltics and widening questions about Europe's political and military future after the Orbán era. Joining us now is Gábor Scheiring, Assistant Professor of Comparative Politics at Georgetown University in Qatar. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So it's been quite a weekend, and there's a new prime minister in Hungary. So if we're looking, also I'm curious because there was an article that you wrote very recently about all this, and you were a little bit critical about the things that changed Hungary that even Magyar is here. So just tell us a little bit more about this power shift. What was really behind it in your mind?
Yes. So I think this is really a historic moment in the life of Hungary, but also more broadly for the global illiberal ecosystem. And Péter Magyar has a really good chance to open a new chapter in the country's history and lay the foundations of liberal democracy. And the inauguration speech really was symbolically quite powerful in terms of promising justice and de-oligarchization, but also bringing the nation together. So these are the positive signs, and I'm indeed hopeful, but I'm also worried about the deeper structures that could, again, lead to a new illiberal cycle. And I identify three traps on the road towards sustainable democratization. And without addressing those three traps, the new republic, the fourth Hungarian republic, could easily end up a failure again, like the third Hungarian republic was, that was before Viktor Orbán, before 2010. And these are, I think, three long-term challenges related to economic inequalities and devaluation. And there's so far fairly little on this in Péter Magyar's program. The second is opening really meaningful new channels of political participation and deliberation. Here again, Péter Magyar is a really talented influencer politician who has huge symbolic political capital, but his party has no real membership. Trade unions in the country are fairly weak. Civil society is galvanized in the human rights and the capital. But outside that, there is a fairly weak organized self-defense of Hungarian society. And when society has no power, then democracy can remain fragile. And the third aspect is culture. And here, Péter Magyar shows signs that he understands what an inclusive nationalism is. And there was a historic moment where the Roma anthem was sang for the first time in the Hungarian parliament, and that is truly symbolic. Also, the EU flag now again flies at the top of the Hungarian parliament building. And these are really good signs. But he keeps on talking fairly negatively about immigration. And my sense is that for the urban middle classes, he promises technocratic efficiency, but for lower income citizens, he still maintains a kind of nationalist framework as a primary political integration channel. And we know from across European cases that a suit and tie form of nationalism only legitimizes far-right narratives on the long run. So I think these are the three challenges that he at his cabinet needs to fix. He still has time to prepare for these, as immense political capital. But I'm slightly worried that if these challenges are not going to be fixed, democracy will not be sustainable. I don't think Péter Magyar's victory is in itself a proof that liberal democracy is back in town. Liberal democracy needs really solid foundations
But at the same time, I mean, if we look at the actual images, and we've been following this election, much of Europe, but especially here at this channel, and I think just some of the images you can see there, I think this is from Saturday, but on the election night, and we've just seen so much of a galvanized public on those young people. I know that our reporters in the field told us that this really was a surge. So when you say economic dependency, I'm also thinking of perhaps, well, there's a new opportunity, isn't there? I mean, the European Union will likely step in and help. You also mentioned civil society. Like I said, I mean, TISA is a new party, but it's also a party that has managed something that wasn't even really considered to be done. And I think also with culture, you're right, potentially, in terms of there is that presence of the far right. But on all those things, rather than seeing it as a trap, is this not evidence, though, that Hungarians did come together and want this change? Or if it's true, it's technocratic, but then what's missing then in your mind? What can really come forward? A technocratic is a very cold expression, but what's missing for this to be successful in the future?
Yeah, thank you. Really good points. And I fully agree. This is a complex moment. It's a moment of hopes. It's a moment of joy. It's a moment of relief. I'm extremely relieved that Viktor Orbán's era is over, and I'm overjoyed. And you can see these images. The overwhelming majority of Hungarian population is overjoyed. And these feelings are absolutely legitimate. And I don't want to, so to speak, spoil those feelings. But my role as an analyst is to provide critical lenses that can really allow the new majority to lay sustainable foundations for new democracy. And for that, I think the first, as you mentioned, economic inequalities and wage stagnation were related to a Hungarian economic model that is very much dependent on foreign investment. And I have heard very little about how Péter Magyar will attempt to change that. For that, you would need a new economic development paradigm, heavy on industrial policy, green industrial investments, and I haven't heard really much detail on that. Now, again, this is just the first day, basically, of the new government, so he has time for that, but I think it would be really important to elaborate that vision fairly early on. In terms of political participation, it's, again, a complex moment. On the one hand, he really galvanized a large part of society, and he did something that the old opposition was not able to do, that is campaign around the country and rally masses in rural Hungary that are now really hopeful about the new chapter in the country's life. And these are really positive signs. But his party has around 30 members officially. And most of these local so-called TISA islands have really little actual say in the policy formation process. And this is a symbolic capital that he's sitting on now. But, you know, this is more like can be a bubble if it is not transformed into a more sustainable, durable form of institutionalized participation and democratic control. And for that, you would need really strong labor unions, really strong civil society, and organized countervailing power across society so that society can protect itself against economic and political elites. If the only power in the parliament and in the opposition is really Fidesz right now, in addition to Péter Magyar's party, I think that is going to be a problem in the long run, not now, but in the long run. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for culture. Again, this is a complex moment. Inclusive nationalism is clearly on the agenda, and the inclusion of, at least symbolic inclusion of Roma minorities is a welcome step. But this will again depend on structural policies, social, economic policies that will create jobs. And also, do not forget about the migration issue. If he keeps on continuing playing from the far-right playbook, that could easily lead to a resurgence, either Fidesz or Hamlin movement, even further to Fidesz. And there's no left-wing opposition to the left of Péter Magyar's party at the moment. So voters will eventually get this illusion. And if nationalism is a strong language, they will, I'm afraid, migrate towards the right.
All right. Well, as you said, it literally is, I think, the first working day, really, first Monday of this new government prime minister. So I know the expectations are high. There will be criticism, but at the same time, as you said as well, let's wait until we have some tangibles. Speaking of problems, I mean, his in-tray will be not just full, I think that's an understatement, but one issue as well, which is something that we've been observing here also from Poland, is just what happened over the last sort of 24 hours. We have the former Justice Minister, Mr. Ziobro, who has been granted a visa, apparently through media reports, from Polish media reports, directly by President Trump. Now, he's apparently been cited in the United States already, although we have various reports on that. But this issue, I mean, this was also really important. I know that Péter Magyar had said that he was early, I think, in the campaign, that if he were to become prime minister, he would extradite those to Poland. What do you think of this latest case now? If it's confirmed, Ziobro has left Hungary, he's in the United States. How do you interpret that in terms of what's gone on in the last sort of 24 hours and what that says about democracy?
Yes, I think these are already the first signs that Viktor Orbán's illiberal system is about to collapse heavily. And one of the key aspects of that is harboring these illiberal fugitives. You know, it was the first instance was Nikola Gruevski from North Macedonia, who I believe is still in Hungary. But now Ziobro has apparently left. We had an American illiberal kind of deep conservative intellectual leading the Hungarian Foreign Policy Institute. He has also left back to the US. So clearly a new chapter is beginning in Hungary's life. And dismantling this illiberal ecosystem that Viktor Orbán has created, including the foundations and harboring, protecting these illiberal fugitives, is one of the very first steps. And I have high hopes in that regard, because this is something that Péter Magyar clearly understands that is critically important. So this is going to be on his agenda and is the top priority, restoring rule of law and creating justice, a just transition, and this de-oligarchization and de-illiberalization of the political system, I think, to a certain degree, will happen.
Mm-hmm. And just one final quick comment, if I may. Visegrad Group, this V4, this format apparently has been touted by the Czech Prime Minister and also by the Slovak President, something they want to revive, including now, obviously, with the new Hungary. Tell us quickly about the relevance of that in these times. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm always extremely supportive of all kinds of international cooperation. I think we live in an era where global challenges really require coordinated international action, and we'll have to see how this really works out. But we know, between, I think, the Polish leadership, at least the government, and the new Hungarian government, I expect very strong capability to cooperate. But then Slovakia is a different kind of question, with the former Viktor Orbán allies still in power. And Czechia is also kind of, I think, closer, not as close to Viktor Orbán, but is also not the same kind of Péter Magyar, Donald Tusk kind of politics. So we'll have to see how this new cooperation will really work in the near future. But in general, this is something that I think would be a welcome turn if this is a cooperation, not the illiberal alliance that Viktor Orbán was trying to build, but more a pro-democracy and inclusive political alliance.
All right, and we also mentioned Donald Tusk there. It's also one of the first trips, I believe, Péter Magyar will take also to Vienna and also to Warsaw, so we'll be covering that as well. Look, thanks so much. Really interesting insights. Gábor Scheiring coming to us from Georgetown University in Qatar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.